Before there were sails, before rudders, before maps or meridians, there was a tree. A single fallen trunk. A shard of fire. The echo of waves lapping against a shoreline that stretched farther than any hunter had ever dared to follow. And in that silence, long before cities rose, before metal was forged, before we had a name for the wind, a handful of our ancestors looked toward the sea, not with fear, but with vision. This is the forgotten story of how prehistoric humans, armed only with stone tools, instinct, and imagination, built the first boats. And in doing so, they altered the course of human destiny. This is not myth. This is craftsmanship at the dawn of cognition. Welcome to the prehistoric shadows. 60,000 years ago, the Earth was colder. The sea levels were lower. Continents were closer. But the world was still vast, and every shoreline was an ending. Humanity lived close to rivers, forests, and firelight, surviving on muscle and memory. We had fire, we had tools, we had language forming in the throat, but we were still land-bound. To cross a body of water wider than a stream, that required a new kind of courage, a different mind. At some point, scattered across what is now Southeast Asia, perhaps in present-day Indonesia or Papua, small bands of humans began to experiment with something extraordinary: floating. It likely began with observation, a branch fallen into the river, a child clinging to driftwood, a log washed to shore. We watched, we noticed, we wondered. Water supported wood. Could it support us? They didn't call it engineering, but it was. Prehistoric humans did what every innovator does. They tested, failed, and refined. Not with numbers, but with hands, with eyes, with lived experience. They saw that a log could float, but tip easily. That a bundle of reeds floated better, but sagged under weight. That bark was light, but brittle. That some woods absorbed water, and others resisted it. And so the first experiment in human buoyancy began. Not in a workshop, but in the wild. Without nails, without blueprints, without writing. But not without knowledge. The earliest boat builders would have selected materials with exquisite care. Trees were not just trees. Some were too heavy, others cracked. But a few, like fig, palm, or acacia, were just right. Buoyant, flexible, abundant. To shape them, they used hand axes made of obsidian or flint, sharp enough to cut, blunt enough to crush. They didn't have saws, but they had fire. They would light small, controlled burns along the center of a log, then scrape out the char with a stone adze. This wasn't a quick job. It could take days, weeks, but it worked. Slowly, the center of the tree became hollow, a dugout, a vessel. Then came the challenge of making it safe. Fibers from tree bark became ropes. Pitch and resin from trees sealed the gaps. Ash mixed with mud made crude waterproofing. Leaves became covers. Bones carved into rudders. This wasn't just survival. It was an ancient symphony of material and meaning. What shape should a boat be? Too narrow, and it tips. Too wide, and it won't move. They didn't use geometry, but they understood balance. Prehistoric boat builders likely mimicked the curves of the fish. Long, sleek, tapered at the ends. They learned through use which designs tracked well, which spun in circles, which could hold gear or people. And they passed that knowledge down, not in books, but in repetition. A boy watched his father notch the tree. A girl helped bind the frame with cord. Entire generations participated in the craft. Boats weren't simple tools. They were cultural artifacts, steeped in memory and meaning. In regions without large trees, people turned to another design: the raft. Using bamboo, reeds, or driftwood, they lashed bundles together with sinew or vines. Lighter, flatter, easier to make, but slower, and at the mercy of the wind. Some communities even created reed boats, like those still used on Lake Titicaca today. Long, elegant, and surprisingly seaworthy. And from these forms came yet another, the outrigger. A main hull with a second floating end, providing balance and speed. Evidence of these appears across the Pacific, where island-hopping cultures spread for thousands of miles.
We traveled to
We sometimes forget.
land.
There were sailors before there were farmers. For every successful voyage, how many were lost? We can't know, but there were many. The sea is not kind to wood or flesh. Boats split on coral. Storms rose without warning. People were swept away, never to be seen again. And yet, they tried again, and again, and again. Because the sea didn't just represent danger, it offered something no forest ever could: a horizon. In many prehistoric communities, boat building may have been a communal act, a rite of passage, a sacred task. Imagine the clearing in the jungle. The fire is lit. The logs are prepared. The children gather resin. The elders chant or sing as the final lashings are tied. The boat is not just a vessel. It is a symbol of will, of control over nature, of trust in craftsmanship, of belief in the journey ahead. They push it toward the water. It floats. Someone climbs in, and for the first time, a human being moves not with the current, but across it. Long before globalization, before trade, before colonization, there were crossings. Australia was settled over 50,000 years ago. The earliest humans reached islands like Crete and Borneo by sea. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate acts of navigation. They started with a single idea, that we could float. And once that was known, the world was never the same. The boat was our first machine, the first thing we made to extend our reach beyond our limits. Before the wheel, before the plow, before cities. It was the first proof that human hands could reshape not just the land, but our relationship with distance, time, and the unknown. A hollowed tree, a braided cord, a sealed crack. And suddenly, the ocean was not a prison. It was a path. The men and women who built those first vessels did more than escape ashore. They changed what it meant to be human. If this story moved you, if you felt the firelight, the damp bark, the pull of the tide, then don't let it end here. There are countless shadows still waiting to be explored. Hidden technologies, ancient ingenuity, forgotten lives that shaped everything we are today. Subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows, where the ancient past is not distant. It's alive, breathing, waiting to be rediscovered. Let's journey backward to the very edge of memory, where myth meets fact and shadows speak. Until next time, stay curious.